take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, September 8th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here. We're back after the Labor Day holiday, and so sorry to those of you yesterday who tuned in expecting a live show. My apologies especially go out to Mason Tavert, who waited by the phone patiently, expecting a live show. My bad, I forgot it was a holiday. We take all the federal holidays off here at 420 Radio because we deserved some time off from time to time. And I hope you had a good holiday. I know that our good friend Left Wing Larry had a good holiday as his Ohio State Buckeyes won their opening game. Thanks mostly to the opposing team's quarterback being knocked out of the game. But hey, a W is a W. Coming up on the show today, we've got the aforementioned Mason Tavert, who was a mensch and agreed to reschedule for today. So at the end of the show today, 3:45, we'll have some time to talk to Mason Tavert. I want to talk to him about their pulling of that public use, that limited public use initiative they were pushing in Denver, Colorado. Shockingly, last week on Thursday, they pulled the initiative before the Friday deadline that it expected to make the ballot. And we'll ask Mason why they pulled that initiative and what they expect to gain in negotiations with the city and business leaders. We'll also get his take on Marijuana Policy Project and the Ohio initiative that is made the ballot for 2015, but has caused a lot of controversy within the marijuana reform movement. Also on the show today, we have an author joining us for our Reformers Reader segment. It's Robin Griggs Lawrence, and she's going to be here talking about the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook. You can follow them on Twitter at Canna Cookbook on Twitter. So Robin will be joining us at 5:30. Also on the show today, we'll have a mini radical rant entitled Who's Afraid of Ohio Legalization, where I collect the basic statements from the three major drug policy organizations on the Ohio Legalization Initiative, which is now known as Issue 3 on the 2015 Ohio ballot. We'll also go behind the headlines today to take a look at the country of Israel, where pain clinics are currently refusing Israelis who are seeking medical cannabis to treat their pain. We'll tell you why in this look at the international medical marijuana scene in the country that pretty much pioneered and still leads the world in medical marijuana research. But we'll start everything off with the 420 Radio News, and in the headlines today, we've got a decision from a state court of appeals in New Jersey about the legality of marijuana searches by cops. We've got an estimate of how much money would be made in Ohio if they were to legalize marijuana through Issue 3. We've got a study from the National Cancer Institute on cannabis users and bladder cancer. More good news for us. We've got a look at the city of Denver and an investigation by the Denver Post on pesticide use in marijuana products, and an update on the Smoke Buddy cart here in Portland, Oregon, where the man has been giving away weed on the city streets. That's right, Portland, Oregon can be a wonderful place to be sometimes. That's all coming up in Hour 1 of the Russ Belville Show. And then coming up in Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio will take your calls and discuss more of the marijuana headlines of the day. Stay tuned. The news is next, right after these messages from our sponsors. Please support our sponsors. They support us bringing this to you for free.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day. Hi, I'm Alex Rogers, producer of the 4th Oregon Medical Marijuana Business Conference, the OMMBC. There have been a lot of recent changes to Oregon cannabis laws. Recreational sales start October 1st, new licensing from the state, and changes to medical marijuana. Are you prepared? Join us at the downtown Portland Hilton September 12th and 13th with the industry's top cannabis business experts, political leaders, exhibitors, and nightly networking events. For more information, join us online or give us a call. The OMMBC. Be part of history.
Expand your horizons and join us every Wednesday night for Gordon Green's Music Planet. You'll hear an eclectic mix of music from all around the world. Catch the first show of the month for an intro to world music. It's Gordon Green's Music Planet Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific with replays weekends at midnight on 420radio.org. Imagine life without taxes. Let New Era Certified Public Accountants, NewEraCPAs.com, handle your Cannabis 280E and tax strategy. Get your business prepared with New Era CPA's Cannabis Finance Bootcamp. NewEraCPAs.com, with years of experience in the industry, we are one of the nation's leading accounting firms for growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies from Washington to California. NewEraCPAs.com. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Replays of 420 Radio News are embeddable and shareable from our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/RadicalRuss. Now, the marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is your 420 Radio News for Tuesday, September 8th, 2015. New Jersey has been running a medical marijuana program since 2010, but that does not mean the drug has been legalized, a state appeals court ruled Tuesday. Police may still search people without a warrant when they detect the smell of marijuana, the appeals panel said in a ruling that is binding on all New Jersey trial courts. A 3-judge panel rejected an appeal filed by a South Jersey man who argued that, quote, possession of marijuana is no longer illegal in all instances, end quote, because the state opened the door to non-criminal uses of the drug by enacting the Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Act in 2010. The state appeals court disagreed, noting that the medical marijuana program provides enrolled patients with an affirmative defense in case they are questioned by police or charged with a crime, but it does not curtail police's ability to search people when they smell marijuana on them, the court said. New Frontier, a year-old analytics firm in Washington, D.C. dedicated to studying the emerging green rush industry in legal marijuana, estimates the total retail sales of marijuana in Ohio will reach $1.8 billion by 2020 if Issue 3 is passed by voters this November. Analyst John Cagia said his sum is based on data from the 4 states with legal markets and the other 24 jurisdictions with medical marijuana programs. The legal markets, Cagia says, quote, are starting to normalize, which gives us greater confidence in our ability to say what we expect will happen in the new markets as they come online, end quote. Cagia notes that marijuana production capacity has increased and retail prices have started falling. Quote, the speed at which the prices are falling is faster than anyone had predicted, end quote. And in some areas of Colorado, prices have dropped by as much as 30% in the first half of 2015. Cannabis users were 45% less likely to contract bladder cancer than their more abstemious peers, according to the National Cancer Institute, a branch of the National Institutes for Health. The NCI study examined 82,050 men of different ages and socioeconomic backgrounds from 2002 to 2003, with the purpose of discovering any links between smoking tobacco and smoking marijuana and the risk of bladder cancer. Researchers followed up with the respondents 11 years later. Just over 40% of those surveyed said they had used marijuana, compared to 57% who said the same of tobacco. The report found that, quote, cannabis and cannabinoids may have benefits in treating the symptoms of cancer or the side effects of cancer therapies, end quote. Tobacco smokers were found to have higher rates of bladder cancer. The study was careful not to draw direct causation from the results. Nearly 6 months after the city of Denver began a crackdown on unapproved pesticides in marijuana products, a spot check by the Denver Post found that the chemicals were still being sold to consumers. 8 lab tests commissioned by the Post on recreational marijuana extracts purchased at 2 shops found most contain no pesticides that are not approved by the Colorado Department of Agriculture. But 2 tests on concentrated marijuana products sold at 1 store found levels of 3 pesticides the state says cannot be used to grow marijuana. Both items were manufactured by Mahatma Concentrates in Denver, which made its extracts from raw marijuana grown by Treatments Unlimited, which operates the Altitude shops in Denver. The level for one of the pesticides was 1,800 times the highest level Denver accepted when it quarantined marijuana plants earlier this year. The pesticides found were myclobutanil, imidacloprid, and avermectin. The owner of a mobile marijuana shop in Portland, Oregon, admits he's using a loophole to give pot away to people over the age of 21 who buy a container from his cart. Smoke Buddy has been operating for several weeks in different Portland neighborhoods. Customers who buy containers get weed for free. The Oregon Health Authority states that a marijuana facility must operate at a particular location to be registered, and any transfer of pot to or from a dispensary must take place at the registered address. But OHA officials said the Smoke Buddy cart doesn't fall under their watch. Portland Police Bureau Sergeant Pete Simpson, in a statement, said if the owner has more than 1 ounce of marijuana in his possession on the car, it would be illegal, albeit a misdemeanor. If we received a complaint, we would respond, but it's not something we're proactively enforcing. This has been your 420 Radio News for Tuesday, September 8th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville.
Get the latest updates on The Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking The Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
It's time for cannabis facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the 4th Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers.
Today in Behind the Headlines, we take a look at the country of Israel, where pain clinics there are refusing marijuana seekers. Now, Israel's been a world leader in medical marijuana, dating back to the discovery of THC in 1964 by Israeli researcher Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, all the way to today, where over 22,000 medical marijuana patients are currently registered with the government. They've got a cannabis permit from their health ministry. But now, pain clinics in Israel are under fire for not providing medical cannabis to patients that the clinics believe are faking their condition to acquire marijuana for recreational purposes. Now, the Association for Medical Cannabis Treatment in Israel is threatening to sue the clinics that refuse to offer medical cannabis. Karnit Yedid, the head of the AMCT, said, quote, "I speak to patients all day. Their pain is unbearable and they have no way to get medical cannabis treatment," end quote. In order to get this cannabis permit from the health ministry in Israel for chronic pain, a patient must undergo treatment at a registered pain clinic for a year and exhaust all other methods of pain control, including the use of addictive hepatotoxic opioid painkillers, as well as risky surgical procedures. Just getting the permit on an annual basis for the appointments and the treatment can cost well over the equivalent of $1,000 a year. Of those 22,000 registered medical marijuana patients in Israel, there are 7,350 who are registered for chronic pain. Unfortunately, the clinics maintain that as the gatekeeper for legal cannabis access, many of the clients seeking their services are merely going through the motions in order to get cannabis for personal purposes. Some of these clinics are just refusing to see any pain patients who express an interest in medical cannabis. Some have put large signs in their windows. Others have telephone messages or disclaimers on their paperwork that they will not make recommendations for cannabis. The clinics contend that they are so overwhelmed already with the current cannabis users that are renewing their prescriptions that new patients seeking cannabis treatment just can't find any time to see their doctors. So these pain clinics are where they have to get their recommendation before the health ministry will issue one of these cannabis permits. Now, the health ministry announced this summer that they'd be increasing the number of physicians authorized to recommend medical cannabis without having to have the patient certified through the medical cannabis unit of the health ministry. The ministry also announced that medical cannabis access would soon be handled through pharmacies rather than dispensed directly by a small group of authorized growers. And Deputy Health Minister Yaakov Litzman said, quote, "Today, pharmacies give all kinds of other drugs like morphine. There's order in that, and we'll make order in this too," end quote. And Mickey Ofer of the Pharmaceutical Society of Israel explained why her organization supports the pharmaceuticalization of cannabis. Quote, "There must be complete separation between the growers and the distribution network for cannabis. Nowhere in the world is a drug or medical device supplied to patients by the manufacturer. Accordingly, medical marijuana must be sold in authorized pharmacies, like any other drug. Growers don't know what other drugs the patient is taking and what interactions there might be. When cannabis will be supplied by pharmacies, the pharmacists can explain the side effects and possible interactions to the patients," end quote. And reading about this coming out of Israel should be the canary in the coal mine for everyone in the United States who still stands behind the idea of fighting only for medical cannabis. The route and path of medical cannabis is toward the pharmacy and toward standardized, placebo-controlled, trial-run preparations of cannabis. We've already seen the beginnings of this in the United States in where we have in New York and Minnesota. Excuse me, couldn't think of which ones they were. New York and Minnesota, these no-plant medical marijuana states where you can only get extracted derivatives of cannabis. And this idea that the pharmacists are necessary to make sure that we can control and warn patients about drug interactions is laughable when the pharmacists themselves are largely not taught about the endocannabinoid system. An estimate of 14% of doctors in the United States are ever educated that we even have such a thing as an endocannabinoid system in the human body. Isn't that remarkable? As far as drug interactions, very little is known about whether there are any interactions with these various drugs that people are prescribed by doctors all the time. But we have yet to see that there's any serious drug interactions. This idea that we need to put it in the hands of pharmacists for that reason seems a bit specious to me. The growers at this point probably know more about the cannabis and its possible side effects than the pharmacists do. So keep an eye on Israel. They've got the longest experience, over 5 decades now, with medical marijuana. And when you see their government and their researchers pointing about standardization and pharmaceuticalization, it should give us all pause.
Well, excuse me!
Well, that sound means that it's 20 after here. It's 4:20 now in Denver, Colorado, so everybody's getting their smoke on. I hope you have the opportunity to celebrate as well. When we come back, a mini radical rant on who's afraid of Ohio legalization.
This is the Russ Belville Show.
Get.buzz. .buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. You're listening to 420 Radio. Listen Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific for Cultural Baggage, podcasting at drugtruth.net. Pioneering marijuana radio activist Dean Becker continues his illustrious career, interviewing reform luminaries on his Century of Lies and Cultural Baggage shows from Pacifica's KPFT in Houston. Check our online listings for Cultural Baggage with Dean Becker from drugtruth.net. The Fingerboard extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The Fingerboard extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well, today in the rant, I want to talk a little bit about this Ohio Issue 3, the Responsible Ohio Amendment that's on the ballot. This last Thursday, I spoke to a reporter from Rolling Stone who was referred to me by Tom Angel of Marijuana Majority. The reporter is doing a story on the division within the drug reform community over this 2015 Ohio Marijuana Legalization Amendment. And it's true in that trying to pass this proposal has raised the ire of many supporters because of the 10 commercial cannabis cultivation sites that go to the 10 investor groups. So I want to take a look at what the leaders in the various marijuana groups have had to say about Ohio's legalization initiative. I was at the International Cannabis Business Conference in San Francisco when Drug Policy Alliance head Ethan Nadelman weighed in on the Ohio initiative. He said, quote, "This thing sticks in my craw. 10 business interests are going to dominate this thing? How much longer do we all as activists have a chance to actually influence the shape of this thing? What we've unleashed now is for-profit interests, big business interests with no connection to this movement that are lining up to see what they're going to do about marijuana reform. People in government? They're going to want the oligopoly too. From their perspective, the fewer number of providers, growers, and distributors, the more big, above-ground, legally regulated interests you have, the easier it is to regulate, end quote. Last month, I had a chance at Seattle Hemp Fest to sit down with NORML's founder and current legal counsel, Keith Stropp, on how NORML views the Ohio initiative. He said, quote, "At NORML, we honestly thought long and hard. Since it's not a perfect, I don't like the idea that these rich people get a special advantage. But when we analyzed it, we realized we are a single-issue organization. We're about legalizing marijuana, and the two things we most care about are stop arresting smokers, which this proposal does. The second is we want to legally establish a regulated market where we can buy our marijuana from a safe and secure environment. This initiative provides that. So we decided it is not our responsibility to get into a fight about who gets rich off of marijuana. Somebody's getting rich off of marijuana in every state where it's legalized, even in those states where it is only legalized for medical use. I'm not saying those fights aren't important, but they shouldn't get in the way of stopping the arrest of smokers. National NORML will almost certainly be endorsing the Ohio initiative." And this weekend, the NORML board of directors met here in Portland, Oregon, and I had a chance to ask the chairman of the board, Dr. Mitch Earlywine, how the vote went. And I didn't get a number on how the vote went as far as for and against. But in an email, Dr. Mitch said, quote, "The board endorsed the Ohio initiative with reservation. We always want to do anything we can to help ensure access to medical cannabis for those who need it, as well as the elimination of criminal penalties for anyone who owns a plant. That said, legal scholars on the board emphasize that other states have reached these goals without some of the drawbacks of the Ohio proposal. It's not the bill we would have written," end quote. The Ohio Legalization Initiative is all but invisible on the Marijuana Policy Project's website. On their state issues page for Ohio, all they write is, quote, "They encourage voters in Ohio to consider their options and decide for themselves which measure they wish to support," end quote, without mentioning any measures on the ballot or any measures proposed for the ballot. MPP did issue a post on their blog in August when Ohio's legalization made the ballot, noting that it would be, quote, "the first state to legalize without first having a medical marijuana program and the first state east of the Mississippi to replace marijuana prohibition with regulation," end quote. Lately, the people behind issue 3, Responsible Ohio, have further angered professionals in drug law reform by handing legalization opponents an easy target in Buddy, the anthropomorphic marijuana mascot with the head of a female flower and the body of a male superhero. They just handed Kevin Sabet his Joe Camel of marijuana on a silver platter, one professional member recently remarked. And Tom Angel, head of the group Marijuana Majority, recently addressed the mascot on a Facebook post where he said, quote, "While I've previously been undecided on whether Responsible Ohio's crazy monopoly model for the legal marijuana market is something our movement should tolerate in lieu of letting the state's current marijuana laws stay in effect for another election cycle or two, their outrageous Buddy mascot pushed me over the edge and tipped me to a solid no on their effort. If their cartel campaigns for legalization so irresponsibly and in a way that positions our side as easily vulnerable to attacks about appealing to kids, how can these people be trusted to manage the industry responsibly after legalization? I don't believe they can." End quote. Personally, for me, I still can never support the status quo of marijuana prohibition. I must always support any initiative that takes away from police the contraband status of marijuana that then leads to unjust searches, seizures, fines, punishments, arrests, and incarceration. However, the number of tears I'd shed if Ohio's issue 3 should fail is growing smaller with every passing news cycle. Particularly, I agree with Tom Angel. If you are so clueless about the reform movement that you had no idea that Buddy would be so roundly criticized, you don't know what you're doing. Now, the question is, will that matter? Some of us in marijuana reform who may not like some of the parts of Responsible Ohio, why, those might be the parts that swing voters do like. Maybe they like the idea that there's only 10 grows that have to be regulated and inspected. We'll see how it turns out. When we come back, we'll check in with the Reformer's Reader. We've got Robin Griggs Lawrence coming on the line, author of the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. The Russ Belville Show, the National Wildlife Refuge for marijuana unicorns.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
The best weapon you can have in the Prohibition War is your mind. Fill your head with the knowledge you need by checking out this latest entry in the Russ Belville Show's Reformer's Reader.
Welcome back, everyone. Today in the Reformer's Reader, we take a look at a great new cannabis cookbook entitled The Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook. Very appropriate title. And our author, Robin Griggs Lawrence, is on the line. Robin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook, it's available now, correct?
It is. It's not available. It's in bookstores September 15th, but it is actually available online at all the majors for, you can get it today.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So we're a week out from the official bookstore release, but you can get it online in advance, basically.
That is the story.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook as far as how big is it, first of all? How much are we looking at reading through? And how does it differ from other cannabis cookbooks out there?
Well, the first thing, there are more than 100 recipes, kind of well more than 100 recipes. It's a 325-page book.
Oh, wow.
It's a hardback, it's a substantial book. The reason I wrote this was because I have two favorite cookbooks in my repertoire. They're Joy of Cooking and the old Better Homes and Gardens, Joy, cookbook. And I needed something that had everything from how to select product to how to understand the difference between the different strains and cultivars, how to make the tinctures, and also wanted to give some good background on the plant itself and its use as a culinary herb. So basically what I did is found 12 chefs, a mixologist who helped me with the cocktail section, a grower who really helped me get it right as far as the plant itself and choosing and processing and growing it, an ethnobotanist who taught me the history, really gave some of the QC history of this plant to include in there. So it really is, what I really tried to put together is a compendium of the knowledge that's out there from chefs who have been working with this plant for decades. Really. So it's really a collective of their knowledge and their wisdom that they so generously shared.
Well, you caught my attention when you said cocktails. You have cannabis cocktails in this book?
One of my favorite sections. Very fun, yes. So we have a whole section on infused cocktails. And I worked with a mixologist and bartender who owns a bar in Amherst, Massachusetts. Just a fantastic, really understands how the cannabis works, with different types of alcohol. My favorite is infused green chartreuse, which is already a very herby or herbaceous kind of drink that when you add the cannabis to it, it's just like, woo, spectacular. And these are very potent, and you can only have one.
Wow. All right. So we've got cannabis, we've got cocktails, some of the typical stuff that we find in culinary cannabis are Rice Krispie treats and brownies and cookies and so forth.
Those, we do have one brownie recipe in there, but it has, green tea and hemp and goji berries and, it's kind of your superfood type of brownie. So what we really tried to do here is for people who can't or don't want to or just want to limit the amount of sweets, we have a great sweet snack section and we have a great dessert section, but we also have breakfast and breakfast beverages and, lunch, dinner, entrees, cocktails, appetizers. So really something for every single part of the day so that, you can, and it's all very, very nutritious. So I worked with a superfoods chef and an organic only, seed to table chef and a paleo chef. And so these are all chefs who are very, very concerned with the health of the food. And one of my favorite quotes in the book is from Scott Dura, who is an award-winning restaurateur here in Denver and also a cannabis cooking instructor and just opened a dispensary and grow. And he says, cannabis is a helping, healing herb, but it can only be that in the company of helping, healing food. And that's really the point here. These are healthy recipes.
That's really good to hear. And
plant.
I'm you're in Denver, so you get a lot of opportunity to interface with the community there. Here in Portland, Oregon, we've got quite a foodie community, and
yes,
I
do.
I can't drive 3 blocks without seeing a vegan place or a gluten-free place. Do you have recipes like that for the special diet folks?
Definitely. So definitely we've got some vegan. We included gluten-free, of course, because so many people are looking for that these days. One of the chefs is paleo, so her recipes are very, protein-rich and, very no carb. So, basically we just, you think about all of the different dietary considerations that people have, and we really tried to provide something for everybody. But at the same time, it also had to be delicious. So, there was some discernment there as far as, delicious and meeting dietary restrictions.
Sure. And speaking of delicious, one of the complaints that people will make about marijuana foods is that they taste like marijuana. What tips do you give people in the book as far as making infused foods that don't come off tasting like alfalfa or hay or whatever else people have said?
Which is, I think, and part of that was back in the day when people just didn't have the methods and techniques down to really play with the flavor. And so it's kind of like, hey, throw some weed in your brownies and see how it's that.
Yeah.
And, that didn't work out. But, and there's kind of 2 schools of thoughts, and the chefs that contributed to the book come from both schools. So some of them really don't like that flavor and are masters at masking it. And that's kind of one of the reasons that you see it so often used in sweets and in chocolate and baked goods, because chocolate is great at kind of masking that flavor. But a lot of the chefs that I've worked with have access now to wonderful flavors of different herbs, so some taste lemony and some taste sweet and some have a chocolate bite and some, are more earthy. And so they, instead of kind of trying to mask it, they're really trying to play with it. And so what they're doing is bringing in other flavors that will, they'll complement each other. And they're using the cannabis taste as just as they would use basil, rosemary, whatever, as really a taste that they're playing with, a flavor. It's like another flavor in their kind of palate.
That's interesting. And we're speaking with Robin Griggs Lawrence. She's the author of the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook. You can follow on Twitter at Canna Cookbook. And I suppose you've got a Facebook page and a website, right?
Yes. Facebook, it's /Canna Bliss Cooking, CANNABLISS Cooking. And Twitter, you said, is Canna Cookbook, yes.
Excellent. Now, I've got the opportunity to travel all over the country and sample foods from just about every region. How about the diversity of entree selections that you might have in the book, as far as, is there Italian food and Mexican food and Chinese food?
In fact, there's a patanesca recipe in there that's fantastic. So yes, we have basically, and again, try to just hit a little bit of everything. So there are some of your basics for, kind of the feasting type of thing. So there's a roast pork and a roast chicken. There are definitely vegetarian options. So there are a couple of stir fries. And then there are a couple of pasta dishes. One of my favorite dishes in this in the cookbook, because it makes use of something that we used to just throw away, is the fresh fan leaf pesto, and that's made with the fan leaves, which generally get composted. Nobody's known what to do with them, and so we brought that in as well.
Wow, that sounds great. And for a guy like me, I could probably turn this cookbook over to my wife and she could work wonders with it, but I'm not much of a cook. How about simplicity? Are there some simple, quick recipes for people on the go?
Definitely, and one of the chefs in here that is kind of her MO is to always have fewer than 6 ingredients and keep it super simple. And another good thing here is if you can master the infusion, right? If you can figure out how to get your butter or your oil or your milk infused, you can use that in all sorts of different ways, right? So if you could just put a little butter on your toast in the morning, or a little infused cream into your coffee, you don't actually have to make a whole meal.
Yeah, just make it an additive to other things that you already enjoy. Yeah. Now,
Which is a nice way to do it anyway, because then people have kind of control of their own destiny. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the chefs suggested, making a dressing that's on the side so people can decide how much or how little or whether they want it or not, which is a good idea, because overdosing, as we know, can be a problem, and there's a whole chapter about that in there. Really?
Tell folks about that a little bit, because I've had that experience. It's not pleasant.
So have I, and you only want to have it once.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's super, super important. And, in Colorado, we've been saying for years, start low, go slow. And that's probably the biggest criticism that, people have had on these edibles is that, all of a sudden you've eaten too much, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a whole chapter on how to prevent that from happening, how to really figure out what the correct dosage is for you, and also what to do if you do eat too much, because when it happens to you, you think you're dying. So, I wanted to make sure to include some tips on what to do if you have eaten too much. You won't die, but you just probably won't. You'll probably sink into the sofa and miss the party.
Yeah. Okay. And I've been there. I know that you don't want to miss that party at all. The book is the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook. Robin Griggs Lawrence is our author. And is this your first foray into publishing, or have you written other books?
No, I wrote actually 3 other books on completely different topics. But my first book was called The Wabi Sabi House, and it's about the Japanese art of finding beauty in things that are imperfect, impermanent, and rustic. And I also wrote a book about healthy nurseries for babies. So this is a complete departure and a kind of new career move for me.
Fantastic. Now, has cannabis been a part of your life throughout this process, or just as you've come to this book?
Well, and that's what kind of led to this book. So in 2009, my gynecologist prescribed medical marijuana to me. I had been raising kids. It just hadn't been part of my world for, really since college. And so when I discovered this kind of whole new world, and all of a sudden I had access to dispensaries and all of these different beautiful cultivars, I realized I have no idea what to do with this. I don't, and so I really wrote the book that I needed. And so that's kind of what pushed this whole thing was I needed to know this stuff, and I figured if I did, there were probably other volleyball moms and dads and people out there like me who did as well.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you've come to it from that perspective, because there's a lot of people who are getting back into this after, raising kids and the kids leaving the house, and want to make sure that they're starting with the right information and that they understand things like decarboxylation and going slow and so forth.
I'd never heard of that before, and they also need to, and they need to understand. It used to be probably for most of us back in the day, whatever you got, whatever you could take in college, and it wasn't what we're getting now. And so there's a whole education process about this really emerging as a, an herb and a plant and a healing plant that needs to get out there because, that whole paradigm has shifted.
Absolutely right. Well, Robin Griggs Lawrence, author of the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook. Follow them on Twitter at Canna Cookbook. And what was it? Cannabliss
Cooking on Facebook. And there's also a website, cannabiskitchencookbook.com.
All right. Well, thanks, Robin, for joining us, and good luck with the sales of the book.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Stay tuned, folks. We'll get another visitor from Denver coming up next. Mason Tvert from the Marijuana Policy Project joins us to discuss pulling that initiative that would have allowed public use, and maybe we'll get him to talk about Ohio's legalization as well. You're listening to The Russ Belville Show on 420 Radio.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Marijuana is not addictive, but listening to the Russ Belville Show is.
This is Radical Russ encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay. Read the Weed Blog today. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Control. In this sport, you have to have control. Control of your nerves and control of your go-kart. Because if you lose control, you lose. I get my thrills behind the wheel. Stay in control, stay away from marijuana. I get high on racing, not drugs.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org.
420 Radio is brought to you by Sacred Serum, who is focused on creating elegant and sophisticated cannabis solutions through its line of dispensers and vaporizers that come preloaded with the world's finest cannabis concentrate. Sacred Serum's concentrate is made on pharmaceutical-grade supercritical CO2 extraction machines that use absolutely no butane or other toxic chemicals. The Vesica, the company's innovative new way to dab and frost, is now available in dispensaries across California. Sacred Serum, elegance and sophistication concentrated.
420 Radio, your ticket to Seattle Hemp Fest.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everybody. Today in the Activist Agenda, we're joined on the telephone by Mason Tvert from the Marijuana Policy Project, as well as the successful Amendment 64 campaign to legalize marijuana in Colorado. Mason, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Russ.
I'm so glad you could join us because there was a news story last Thursday that caught my attention. It really surprised me, and it had to do with the limited public use initiative you guys had proposed. Both you and Brian Vicente had proposed this initiative that would address the glaring deficiency, not just in Denver, but everywhere marijuana has been legalized, and that is no legal place for us to congregate and use cannabis, especially out-of-town tourists. The news on Thursday was that you'd pulled the initiative despite having twice the number of signatures you needed to qualify and what looked to be a good chance of passing the initiative. So we just wanted to clarify why pull the initiative at this time and where do you go from here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this news should come as a eye-opener, not because it seems like a negative thing, but because it seems so overwhelmingly positive. What we have right here is a situation where Denver city officials in some of the largest organizations in the state, like the Colorado Restaurant Association and the Hotel and Lodging Association, have come out and publicly said that they want to collaborate and work on a law that will allow some form of social cannabis use by adults. So in other words, think of it this way. If we had said we want to make marijuana legal for adults and the city said, well, we'd really love to work on that and ensure it's a law that will implement and make it work and so on, and all these big organizations said, yeah, let's make this happen, people would see that as a pretty massive step forward. Keep in mind, we've run a couple initiatives in the city of Denver here that were successful to make marijuana possession legal, to make it the lowest priority, where the city the entire time was kicking and screaming and saying it would be against it, and then ultimately refused to implement. And now we've got these officials saying, we're ready to work with you, we're ready to make sure this goes smoothly.
So is that the key? This I know here in Oregon we had a situation with our law that we had to kind of cave on because they threatened us with the federal law, that if we didn't give them what they wanted, they'd come back and fight it, and then it would be all tied up in the courts. Is that the deal, that the state law says no public use, and so if you had tried to go forward in Denver with public use, they could have fought you at the state level?
Well, the city had come out and said that it was against the state law, although we would disagree. And in fact, the reason that we were even running this is because currently Denver city law violates the state's laws. So what Amendment 64 says, and keep in mind Amendment 64 is a constitutional amendment, unlike like Washington State where it was done statutorily. Amendment 64 gives property owners the right to regulate the consumption of marijuana on their property, and that is in the Constitution for the state of Colorado. Now, the state of Colorado has created a definition of what constitutes public marijuana consumption, but the city of Denver has actually created an even broader definition, therefore making it illegal to consume in even more places than under state law. Now, we have said, listen, right now you're violating the Constitution and someone might sue and take the city into costly litigation. Why don't we just go ahead and address this, make it very clear what's allowed, what's not allowed, and make sure that it respects what voters approved here statewide. And at this point, first the city came out and said it was a violation of state law, but now they've changed their tune and they're saying, well, there's a way this can be done and we want to work on it with you. And you know what? If that's how they want to do it, that's great. And if they don't follow through, or if we're not happy with the end result, we'll run an initiative next year. And quite frankly, in a presidential election year next year, we'll probably have an even better chance of winning than if we were to do it this year.
Okay, so you've got them going along now where they'd been reticent to want to even address the issue. Now they say they want to work on the issue, but isn't it possible that you're going to end up with a more compromised set of public use rights than what you would have won through the initiative?
We'll have to see. And, if it's not something that we believe is acceptable, if we don't believe that it's giving consumers the rights that we believe that they should have, at least at this point in time, in terms of what we believe is doable, then we will pursue an initiative. I mean, we're not ones to back down from a challenge here. And I'd say we pushed the envelope in Colorado further than anyone. We included a home cultivation when the folks in Washington didn't. We brought forward an initiative for public consumption in private establishments when no one else was doing anything like that. And we've been very, very insistent that adults who use cannabis be treated similarly to those that use alcohol. Now, can we guarantee that the city's going to come back and say, well, we are going to completely allow marijuana in every possible location where alcohol use is allowed? I don't know. I doubt that they will be so inclined, but if they come back and say that they want it to be so overly limited that we feel it's not treating adults fairly who choose to use marijuana, then we'll move forward with an initiative. If they come back and they have a thoughtful a proposal they're willing to work with us on, then great.
Not to speculate too much, but if their proposal is that marijuana can only be at places where alcohol is not, would that trigger moving forward with the initiative?
It would probably take some strong consideration. It would really depend on the extent to which that's the case, where would it be allowed, where wouldn't it be allowed, what would the circumstances be, what type of licensing and rules. There's so many issues here in terms of, how will these businesses be allowed to operate, how will they be licensed, how will they be regulated. What we had proposed was that businesses who allow on-site alcohol use are already being subjected to regulations. They already have to follow, restrictions on where they can be located and when they're allowed to operate and so on. And we wanted that to simply guide businesses that chose to allow adults to also use marijuana. They may come back and say, well, that can't be the case. There needs to be some specific guidance on allowing marijuana consumption. Or they could come back and say, well, we don't want them to be mixed at all. Now, we very much believe that adults who use marijuana should be able to associate, socially with adults who use alcohol. We do not want a separate but equal proposal, and that's why what we brought forward was not cannabis-only clubs, which we received some flack from, including from some folks in the marijuana policy reform world who, quite frankly, it was surprising to hear them say that they felt that marijuana users should be treated differently and should be separated. And
I got to tell you,
that's not what we want.
I was shocked by that too, and I'm glad to hear that you're rejecting the idea of separate but equal accommodations. That's never a good idea in American policy. Now, Mason, you did have a detractor who showed, maybe detractor's not the right word, but a critic who showed up at your press conference claiming $18,000 to $20,000 of taxpayer money went toward this initiative that now has been pulled. Anything you want to say about that?
It was really kind of an odd and unfortunate situation. We don't really know exactly what happened here because the clerk's office had a representative basically show up where our news conference was going to be taking place just to let the media know that they spent $18,000 to $20,000 in counting the signatures for this initiative, which is quite frankly irrelevant. For one thing, that's their job. That's what we pay for. We have an initiative process, and when people submit a petition, you count the signatures. But for them to in any way suggest that we should not have done this or that we should have worked with the city first is really misleading, because we have wanted this to occur for quite some time. We've tried to get the city to take action for 18 months. And it was not until after we submitted our petition. So, we introduced the initiative. It was in the news. We talked about it. We had to go through meetings with city attorneys, and the city never said anything to us. They just said that they didn't like it. And it was not until we turned our petition in and proved that we had far more than enough signatures needed that we started hearing from officials saying, well, why don't we talk about possibly collaborating and putting something together? So, honestly, I don't know. I don't think it's been confirmed that the city had to spend that amount of money, but if they did, then apparently that's the cost of getting your city to do something that the people wanted to do in the city of Denver.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I would take it as well, is that the taxpayer money was squandered by the city not responding to the taxpayers in the first place.
Keep in mind, we had to raise money, so we had supporters who were donating. There's no organization funding this. So, I work for the Marijuana Policy Project, but this was not an MPP project. I was actually prepared to take 2 months of unpaid leave to run this campaign.
Wow.
And, everyone who was working on this, Brian and some of the other folks at his law firm, were all doing it pro bono. We spent hundreds of hours of our time writing this and going through this process and then coordinating a petition drive and doing all of this. So, we invested quite a bit in it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. And Mason, before I let you go, if I could get you to put the MPP hat on for a second, the ballot initiative in Ohio has generated a lot of controversy. Any official position from MPP on endorsing that ballot initiative?
It's obviously something that's getting a lot of people talking. Our position on this is that, our organization's mission is to end marijuana prohibition and replace it with a system in which marijuana is regulated. And so to that end, we support that. And that's what the Ohio Initiative will do. Now, there's a question as to the, whether people find the means in which it will be regulated palatable. And that's a question for Ohio voters to decide. You know, do they think that this is the way that they want it? So in terms of if you want to end marijuana prohibition, if you want to see marijuana being regulated and being treated like a legal product, then yes, this is an initiative to support. If you are concerned with the specifics and how this is being set up, then that's something for those voters to decide. So it's there's no simple answer, but you know, we support it in that it would end prohibition and regulate marijuana.
All right. Well, thank you, Mason, for being so candid and responding to our late requests. And my apologies again for missing you yesterday. I totally forgot about the holiday.
No problem at all.
All right. Have yourself a great day, and good luck on all future endeavors.
Thank you, sir. Same to you.
All right. That's all the time we got for today. Stay tuned. Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio is next. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it,